Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you here tonight.
Wow.
I'm actually webinaring, I should say, or podcasting, depending on what you're listening to, from Chicago this time. I was in Colorado during the winter. So this is kind of exciting. You'd never know it was spring here in Chicago because it's gray and rainy and cold. And originally, Jeff Howard actually said he was going to step in for me because I was supposed to go to the Cubs game tonight, and we got rained out, and oh my gosh, it's horrible. It's freezing. It's like 30 degrees. So I am excited to be here because not only do I really enjoy these ladies, but I love this topic and I think it's great. I have to be honest with you. We're talking about Pilates is for everyone tonight. And one of the things I find fascinating is Pilates has been around, oh my gosh, has been like hot for over 20 years. This is not like a fad, okay? And that's what I find interesting. It's actually getting a surge of attendance and admissions at our conferences and what I'm seeing all over. So I think that that's fascinating. I think it's very, very important. If you picture a Pilates class, most people would think of young women only. However, the benefits of Pilates are just as important for older adults and men of various ages. Join our panel of experts as they review Pilates' effect on the core, functional flexibility, strength, balance, and Pilates is really an ideal form of exercise for everyone. So we have with us tonight Isabelle Schaefer. She's worked in the fitness industry for over 25 years, and she learned something new about Zoom today, how to turn her volume up. So we're very excited about that. And she's also a group exercise instructor and an NASM CPT. She works with a wider range of clients. She does primarily personal training with Pilates clients right now, but she's also done group group training as well. And she's a Stop Pilates instructor. And then you guys know Abby. Everybody knows Abby. And she's the owner and CEO of Abby Fit Consulting. And I'm stopping there because I have the oldest bio of her in the world. She's an amazing presenter. She has been teaching Pilates for over 20 years. She wrote our Pilates certification. We first started, believe it or not, with June Kahn, and then Abby has stepped in and really exploded the program through the years. She also wrote our bar instructor training, and she also is like a Schwinn Master trainer. She's won our SCW Best Presenter of the Year award. She's pretty cool. And we've got Linda Mcgee. Now, Linda's got her master's degree in exercise science, and she's an industry veteran, and she began her full-time career in 1985. She's an NASM master trainer, performance enhancement specialist, corrective exercise specialist. Oh my God, I can't even breathe anymore. ACSM exercise physiologist and Stop Pilates certified. She's got her own personal training studio and her own Pilates business. So we've got these experts that are coming at us now, and it's really nice to see this. I am going to just launch right in. Carter's helping us manage this webinar. We have about, oh my goodness, I think it was about 100, and this morning it was about 147, and I think it's about 160 people that have registered. We think we're going to end up, believe it or not, with about 60 or probably 70 people that are going to show up for the webinar. And then we get a lot of people that show up for the podcast. They like to listen to it now, kind of a little bit of zoomed out. So we're happy to bring that in. So the first thing I'm going to do is, Linda, I'm going to hit you up. And we were chatting before we turned the camera on. What is Pilates? Give me that nutshell.
So I usually tell people it's a flow of exercises for core strength and really starting from stabilizing to mobilizing and getting people pain-free.
Oh, that's excellent. All right. And how do you feel like people benefit from Pilates?
I hear different things from different clients of mine, but common thread is the flexibility, especially in their hamstrings, low back, and of course, core strength, which is really where Pilates is targeting and starting from. But being able to function a little bit better because their posture has improved so much.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm going to stop here for just 1 second. Please have people move their mouse. You can move your mouse, go to the bottom of the screen, go to the left of the share screen button. And I already see people doing it. Type your name in and type where you're from. And the beauty of showing up to a live webinar is that you guys get to ask questions. And we really do pay attention to that. So that's a really nice thing to be able to add, because we want to know what you want to know. Now, Isabelle, how do you see the benefits of Pilates and the general description?
Piggyback on what Linda has said. I don't want to repeat what she has said because it's all valid and on point. But honestly, in terms of testimonials, one of the most common testimonials that I get, especially from my older clients, is that they receive compliments on their posture. And as we know, for an aging population, that's a big deal. And so I think that that's a benefit that really is attractive to everyone, especially living in this era of Zoom and computers and just rounding our backs forward. But I think that's one of the best things that I like to hear when some of my older clients say, I've been complimented on my posture, I'm walking better, I'm standing better, I'm looking better. And so it's practical and it may be a little bit vain, but who doesn't like to hear that when they are working hard and getting older?
Yeah, and it affects the quality of their life
Of
if
course.
they feel better, because it's not just about the physical, it's about the mental. And Abby, you emphasized the postural benefits of Pilates.
Yeah.
And what are you finding that are the primary benefits of Pilates?
Well, I think that's key right there. The posture is part of it. So it's all about core stability in Pilates. There's that balance. We always talk about that balance of stability and mobility, and that each joint has a certain amount of mobility and stability that can generate the right amount of power so that we can function in our daily lives. And it always comes back to that, getting people to function better. So making them in our classes, just again, creating more core stability, but making them more aware of their posture. And I know we kind of talked about this earlier, but and I can't remember which one of you guys mentioned this, just assessing posture. But as soon as people walk in the door, when I see them walking in the door, I'm assessing their gait, their alignment, their posture. So it's giving you information about things that you can say in your class and say in the training to help them to find a better place to work. And again, help them to function better in their daily life.
Help them to function better. And, it's interesting. We all think about, we think it's going to be these younger people that are entering the Pilates studio in these little crop tops and the shorty tights. And thank you, Abby. It's, no, yeah. But it's like, that's what we think. And we're getting an older population enjoying Pilates. And Isabelle, you brought it up that you feel better, you can focus on your posture, it really helps you. Isabelle, you've kind of shifted from a group exercise more or less because of the pandemic to be more of the personal training oriented. And how is that working for you? And what type of clients is that drawing to you?
Well, as I mentioned before, first let me say, I do miss teaching those MAC classes. However, I love and always have loved working one-on-one or in small group sessions. I feel that I can be more hands-on, and I think that's appealing to older people, especially people who are not comfortable post-pandemic being in a gym. So they feel safer in a small environment, in an environment that they feel is very clean and that isn't crowded. So working with that population has been helpful. They also have, as I said before, they have more money. They can afford private training. older population has more disposable income, and so for a number of reasons, they tend to move towards the studio environment. And it's been very beneficial for me, and I do enjoy it. Fortunately, I get along with old people, old folk, and I get along with young folk as well. And I would say,
Now, how did you, I think a lot of people on this call were, group instructors.
Mhm.
How did you develop this personal training? How did it evolve to get these personal training clients? Because it would be great to move from a larger mat class, whether it be 5, 10, 25 people, to this personal training and be able to generate that extra revenue.
I'm very fortunate. I don't have a big social media presence at all. I have always worked by word of mouth and referrals, especially because my studio is in my home. And so I can't have just anyone coming into my home. You have to know someone who knows me. And so basically, it's just word of mouth. When I did work, I still work at a local gym here, but some people who are on here know I worked for New York Sports Club for 20 years until recently. And they didn't always have a Pilates program. And so I honestly just promoted myself there and was able to get clients from there. And then when they developed the program, I worked for them as well. But mostly my clientele is literally just word of mouth. I get text messages, physical therapists. I've had a number of surgeries, so I'm in tight with my PT, and she will recommend me to her patients as well. And that's how really it has spread.
That's interesting. The same thing happened with me with my physical therapist after I had my knee surgery. I'd been talking, and then he started recommending me to do personal training for some people. And I'm like, now it's funny is I don't do that, but I'm like, that's a great piece of advice to do that. Have you seen, Linda, that any of your clients have changed from, let's say, 2019 to now you're live in 2020 and open? Are they getting younger? Are they getting older? Men, women, kids?
So for me, a lot of the clientele has stayed the same since I am my own business. In 2019, I was still doing some at a YMCA. So I had a little of that. But once then the pandemic hit, I did a little more, I started some virtual mat Pilates classes. And I had a little bit more draw from some people maybe who had seen me at some of the conferences. And so now all of a sudden, and if somebody who's out in Chicago, even though I'm in Connecticut, they can still take one of my mat classes. So that was really kind of fun to re-engage that connection. But it's, as Isabelle had said, a lot of word of mouth and, oh gosh, I liked this class. And I did, a couple of promos with, hey, yep, you signed up for class. Thanks for sticking with me, during our 6 month of pandemic that we were supposed to be limited to, and like, hey, bring somebody for free and let's have some fun. So there was a way to kind of bring in more of that, but I found that my females were much more inclined to invite another girlfriend than any male clients. And the males wouldn't turn their cameras on as often as the females. So that was a little something to learn as well.
My husband did the same thing. We were taking yoga together and we were taking this hot yoga class. So we'd put the space heater on in our little basement area that we work out in. And every time, and I would turn the camera on and my husband would turn the camera on me. And then I would turn it on us and he would turn it on me. And he hated it. And he's just so good looking that I didn't understand why. All right. So Abby, how are you? Are you doing group classes right now and personal training? And how are you dealing, what type of clients are you working with and how are you working with them?
Well, I only do group. So yeah, group is my thing. Group is what I love. And I do small group. And most of my classes right now are kind of a hybrid. They're kind of a Pilates hybrid. So it's like a mix of Pilates and a mix of bar, because I feel like people want to get so much more done in that hour. They want something that's a little bit more challenging. What I've noticed in my classes, and even the Pilates classes, because there's a Pilates class, like a classic Pilates class right before my class, is that the population hasn't really changed that much from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. It's pretty much the same. What I have noticed is that I am able now, believe it or not, to get some younger people in my classes, because earlier on, and I taught Pilates at Equinox for years and years and years, the class was a little bit older. I had an older population because if you know Equinox is known for some of their high intensity and more challenging classes. So the people that would join Equinox, they would be a little older. They felt comfortable taking the Pilates classes because they were, let's just say, it was a little bit less challenging than doing, your hardcore high intensity class. So now I see just kind of a mix, some of the same people, a little bit younger in some of the Pilates classes. But my hybrid classes, I mean, that's what I love, because people in the classes now, I get young, I get old, I get pretty much everybody.
Yeah, and I think we were talking earlier when we were on the phone, we were talking earlier that Pilates seems to be one of the hardest instructor markets to find. We can't find enough Pilates instructors. And I think my guess is part of it is because during the pandemic, a lot of instructors went out on you had no choice. You had to go out on Zoom. You had to go out on your own. Like Isabelle, you had to start personal training, or Linda, you had to start doing, doing it virtually and getting students from all over not only all over the USA, but all over the globe. And Abby, you do group classes also online as well now. So I think as Pilates instructors, there's more of a market for us. How do you, Linda, I think you've had some success attracting men into your Pilates program, and you've got to share how you did this. Because I also think, you can embarrass them enough, like having their wife humiliate them, you better come to class, you're putting on weight, get them to come once, but how do we get them to stay?
Yeah, it's funny. And actually, one of my male clients that I have actually came, I had given his wife, I had done personal training in their home. And as a Christmas gift, I had given her 2 free Pilates sessions at my home on the reformer. And after a year, she never used them. So I said to her husband, I'm like, do you want them? He's like, sure, I'll try. So got him in and tried it. And, at first he was like, oh, this is easy. Okay, good. And then like you just let them get settled a little bit, and then, okay, let's try this. And whether it's on the reformer, and I loosened up springs so his core had to actually work more and he couldn't power through it. It was this realization that, oh, I'm not as strong as I thought I was. And another client I actually got from golfing. And so I'm like, let's try, I'll bet you I can help you out. And so I would start doing some moves. And I said, do you see how this with your rotation, trunk rotation, do you do this in your golfing? Yeah. I said, so do you see? So I was able to get something that they already did in recreation and have Pilates help them through it. And the same guy was actually, as an adult, learning how to swim. So he said he was at the local Y, and he said, I can't float. I go, what do you mean you can't float? He goes, I can't float. And so we did some extra bridges, and we did some extra glute work, and, did a lot of the core work of the Pilates. And I'm like, you have to feel how you are squeezing your glutes here. So we're getting that mind body connection. I'm like, I want you to try this in the pool. And he comes back the next week. He goes, the lifeguard says to me, you did it. Must be that Pilates. I'm like, all right. So, but really
it's hard. It's like pulling into the stuff they love and what they do. And that's what's really fun. And I think, Abby, what you've done, you were talking about fusion classes, sneak in a little Pilates, sneak in a little of that posture at the end of your cycle class, at the end of a HIIT class, and we all know we're pulling in some Pilates moves.
Well, I think, and I say this about Pilates when I, talk about the benefits of it. As an instructor learning Pilates, the one thing it taught me so much. We mentioned injuries, and I have a ton of them. And you know, when you get injured, first of all, you learn so much about yourself, and you also become a better trainer for other people. So I know that's happened for everybody. But what Pilates has done for me, it's made me aware of my own posture, number one, and it also, number two, gave me a whole new vocabulary to use in all of my classes, not just in Pilates. So it really changed the way that I teach, not just Pilates, but the way that I teach everything, my strength classes, sculpt classes. I mean, even cycling, which I don't, talk about the core that much in cycling, but even your posture in cycling. And I think a lot of right now, I think I wrote you a text and said that I get these, these job boards, these emails, and it is the number one job. It's the number one requested job right now. And I say we collectively as an industry need more Pilates instructors. And it's just, you've had those of you who might not be certified by Pilates, in anything Pilates, it's just taking the first step and getting a mat certification. That's just the beginning. And I think that's what makes Pilates a little intimidating, because you're like, well, I start here and then I have to learn this. And now I think I've learned everything, but then there's this, and then there's this, and there's so many different layers to Pilates. And it makes you so much more aware of what you don't know. So what you don't know, and it just improves everything about the way you teach.
Yeah, Isabelle, please.
A couple of things that Abby has said really resonated with me. One, I have had a number of injuries throughout my life. And the way I arrived at Pilates was because I was sick and tired of being in chronic back pain. And nothing else helped until I finally went to Pilates. After the first session, my Pilates instructor said to me, you need to stop lifting heavy weights and you need to stop beating your body up and find your core. I was muscling through every single exercise when I first started practicing. And after practicing consistently for a while, and I had to search, because we're talking, over 20 years ago. Not easy to find Pilates on Long Island 20 years ago. I used to live in Brooklyn, so there it was easy in the city. So that was my first introduction to it. And then once I began to feel less back pain, I said to myself, wow, why doesn't the whole world know about this? Everyone should be doing this. And then as far as hybrid classes, like Abby, two things. I became a much better trainer once I started learning to teach Pilates. My verbiage changed, the way I looked at every person from the moment they walked into the room. And I also try to just incorporate it basically into every format that I teach. So they don't even know that they're doing Pilates sometimes.
So that's great. We sneak it in. We got some interesting questions. I don't want to ignore them. Nanette asked, and I'm going to throw this at you, Abby, does Pilates help with osteoporosis and building up bone?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything that's weight bearing, anything that is any type of strength or muscle conditioning will do that. And the great thing about it is there's no impact. So there's no impact, whether you're doing it, you're doing mat, which I always think mat is harder. Everybody thinks mat is easier. I'm like, no, mat is the hardest. Mat was the beginning. All the other equipment like Reformer and Cadillac should make the mat easier to do. And I don't mean easier, but you learn to use your body better. So it definitely builds bone density.
Right. It's Nanette, it's the muscles contract and the muscles shorten. And what they do is they're pulling on the bone, and the bone actually has slight little fragments that kind of almost float off of it. And it has to densify, it has to calcify against that tug of the muscle against the bone. That's why strength training actually helps with osteoporosis. And therefore, so does Pilates, and so does even yoga. Whenever you're doing something that deals with resistance, whether it's your own body weight, the muscle contraction, it really does help with, it prevents the effects of osteoporosis. What's so interesting is I used to sell fitness equipment on QVC, and I did it for 12 years, and they used to use my cells on QVC as like the poster child for what you can say and what you can't say on TV regarding fitness. And I remember once I was doing a Pilates move on a total gym, and I said, yes, and this strength training will prevent the negative effects of osteoporosis. And I got a legal notice that said that there's no documentation of this, and you can't say it on air, and it's a violation of the FTC. And I was like, oh my. So I got every book together, every article I could find, and I'm like, I hate these people. And I threw it all at them. And of course I had to I couldn't say it again. So when anybody on the phone would call in while I was on air and say, yes, and my doctor told me that I was strengthening my bones through exercise. And I said, what did your doctor say? And I'd make them repeat it. So yes, Nanette, you definitely you have positive effects from strength training. And then Pam said, she wrote, I'll be teaching Pilates live and on Zoom. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do a hybrid, do live and Zoom at the same time. Can you give me some advice about teaching proper form when the Zoomers who are boomers show me their ceiling first? I know that's, it's not, you're laughing, Linda, but you've got to share with us, because this happens so often that we can't see their body, how they're moving, because they've got it shining on the ceiling or shining on the dog. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I don't do hybrid any of my Zoom. It is all Zoom, and I'm a boomer, so I get all that stuff too. So I'm like, okay, first we need to do the Zoom thing to help them set that up if that's possible. But what I do for my cueing is I actually, for those whose cameras are on their bodies, is I take some of my cues often from what I'm seeing, because that's what I do in real class. But if you have a time even to set aside, hey, log in 10 minutes ahead of time, and we're going to, work on camera stuff and then go through. But if you've worked with them individually, you probably already know their bodies, and you can't go wrong if you think of the kinetic chain and start telling them, all right, where their cervical spine should be, where their shoulders, their whole spine, their pelvis, their knees, their ankles, where they should be, and not worry so much about cueing what they're doing wrong, especially since you can't see them, but you're cueing what they should be doing right.
Yeah, and that's a very positive approach. Abby, how do you manage it? Because you do hybrid programs.
Yeah, and I love what you just said there. You're cueing what they should be doing right and what they should be feeling. I do a lot of it with them, and I can kind of see them out of. But that in Zoom, you've got if you have 20 people in there, they're all across the top of the screen. You can barely see that. So I cue what they should be feeling, what they should be, where they should be feeling it. I understand immediately, I know you just said this, but where things will go wrong, what is going to go wrong with this exercise, and how do I bring them back to do it right? So I make sure that I'm doing it with them. I feel it with them. At the same time, I glance at the camera, but I tell them where they should be feeling it, and go back to this, know what's going to go wrong because every movement, there's always primary movers, and what joint should be moving, what joint should be stable. I talk about that a little bit, but know what's going to happen and know what cues you need before you get there. Because I understand what the predominant, go back to this, dysfunction will be on most people. When you're working one-on-one, you can look at that individual, but when you're looking at a large group, you've got to look at, what's the predominant dysfunction that you're going to see in that class for everyone.
Right.
Redundant, but yes.
The general cue then, you want to keep the class positive, and sometimes if a teacher's like, no, turn this out, no, turn this in, no. Honestly, the reason my husband loved this teacher that we were taking on Zoom is because she never corrected us. She told us where we should be. She gave us what areas, where, like you said, Abby and Linda, where you should be feeling it. And that really helped. And Isabelle, you're doing mostly live one-on-one, right? With people?
I do virtual one-on-ones and in-person one-on-one, and I do in small group virtual.
And I am going to ask you, Marilyn actually asked, which Pilates training should one start with? And I thought that that's a good question as well. But please share with us first about Zooming with them, and then I'll ask you about the certs. I just didn't want to forget.
Zooming, I I have no problem calling out my clients because I'm not teaching to a big group and they've been with me for a long time. And I find that they actually like being corrected and helped. So they appreciate that. And everyone who's worked with me, I've given this lecture, even when I taught in big classes in the gyms, I always said, when I take a class, I want the instructor to fix me, call me out, correct me, whatever needs to be done to get me in the right place, because that means they're paying attention and that they care. And so that's sort of a disclaimer that's out there with everyone I work with. So my cues may not always be the most positive, but I tell them, you know, sometimes I don't have time to find the exact verbiage to make you feel warm and cozy, but you know that it's, you know, I'm keeping it real.
Get up, Buttercup.
Yeah, and I'm with love, and it's all good. It's all good. So basically,
that's what we used to do as dancers. Like my teacher was always whacking me with this stick. And you know, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I loved it because I knew she was paying attention to me because I knew I was good. You know, that's what you kind of went. So Isabelle, I hear you loud and strong.
and just to interrupt you for 1 second, when I was teaching group bar classes at New York Sports Club, one of the members brought me a stick because she said, here, you're all snapping your fingers, clapping. And she said, so I brought you a stick so that you can just tap that stick when you want to get us on beat. So I can totally relate. As far as certifications, I think everyone has to start with the mat. That's the foundation, that's the basis, and that's really the way to go. I don't know if, you know.
That's
Linda,
great. No, I think that's great. What do you think, Linda?
Yeah, absolutely. Starting with the mat, you know, it's where it all started, but also if you think about it, that's where you can start teaching immediately. You don't need any other props. You don't need the equipment. You can start practicing teaching on people and you can practice the whole repertoire without needing anything else. So I would again say the mat is the best place to start.
Very cool. Abby, what is your opinion?
No, I absolutely agree. Absolutely, because that's how we started, and they wouldn't even let us move on. We had to start with mat level 1, and next to mat level 2. They wouldn't even let us move on to, you know, next for me was reformer, but they wouldn't let us move on to taking on any of the large apparatus until we learned mat level 1 and mat level 2. And by the way, when I first learned, I corrected because there's a lot of ego involved. Like in the beginning, when you're younger and you're working out. And when I went into my first Pilates class, they're trying to correct my posture. And I'm like, no, I'm already like, close your rib cage. I'm like, no, my ribs are closed. And I'm like, it took me a long time to get past my ego to understand, you know, all these little nuances of my own body. And when you finally get there, that's when you move on. To me, that's when you move on to learn some of the large apparatus.
Oh, that's great. Now, Abby, we got a question from Pauline. What more than bridges, and I might, Linda, throw this at you as well, since you were talking about floating, you know, what more than bridges can help elderly women who had a stroke 15 years ago? She loves water aerobics, but she sinks when she's in a prone or supine position, trying, you know, to relearn swimming strokes.
So, well, I think, so if you're that's just one movement from Pilates, your Pilates bridge. There's so many other movements that you can do, and I think you've got also whoever this she's training somebody who's older, and it seems like has a lot of limitations. That means you'll probably have to modify many of the movements. We talk about mat and being on the ground. Maybe what you do is you modify them, and you have her do just some of the movements in a more upright position. And you can also do them elevated, even on a a massage table, on a chair, seated, kneeling. So there's a lot. I mean, I think when I think Pilates, I think of the plank. That's like I know we think bridge and we think 100, we think of doing, the supine spinal flexion. But the thing that I think about most is doing a plank. So how do you modify a plank, which is really one of the ultimate core exercises? How do you modify your plank for somebody who might have some dysfunction. But I think probably one of you guys who train that population one-on-one might have a better answer.
Yeah, I think Abby, you got that spot on, but I think I could also add like even simpler things like an opposite arm, opposite leg raise, completely in a prone position, gets them, and in a slower controlled manner, as most Pilates moves are, to get them into that phase. And then some of the things that I've done with a plank is I actually have people on all fours and then just lift the knees up and just hold that as a plank and then kind of progress on. And then one of my clients, I actually, she's one of my younger clients in the mid 30s, but she'll be in that beast position, right? The knees raised. And then I make her lift one hand up about 3 inches. And that's usually when the cursing starts. But you hold that like 3 seconds. So, for somebody who's older, 80 years old, maybe it's where their knees are just hovering over like a pad, or they're on the Bosu, knees are on the Bosu, feet on the ground, hands on the ground. So their core has to work a little bit more to stabilize, and then they can just pop their knees up a little bit. And if they lose balance, they're just right on the Bosu. So again, like as Abby said, using some props and some things would add to that.
Do you do that, Isabelle?
I do, and I agree with all of that. And maybe if you don't have apparatus available at your disposal, that's a great opportunity to throw in some bands. Love bands. There's so much that you can do with bands, and you can simulate reformer exercises and tower exercises by using bands. So that's probably the only other thing. And maybe even also mini stability balls for doing that plank work. And you'd be surprised how creative you can get. And again, a lot of that will come from the mat work, and just kind of, once you have the basic principles and once you have that foundation, give yourself permission to just be creative and look at the body that you're working with. I assume this is a one-on-one situation, and then just say, okay, just like Linda said, maybe raise one hand, maybe hover one knee, and just, it's all about progressions and building on.
That's great. That's great. Do you take a different approach to training? I mean, Abby, you're in a group setting, so I'm assuming you get a mixed crowd. You already said you get older adults. Your clients tend to be migrating and moving a little bit younger. Do you get men in your class, and do you change your approach when you're dealing with these different groups? Like, I'm assuming in the morning you're going to get one type of crowd, possibly in the evening you get a different type of crowd.
Honestly, the cues that I give, I mean, we talk about that core engagement, and I bring up, I think the only thing that's different, because it's all the same anatomy for the most part. There's some different plumbing going on, we know that. So there might be a few different cues that you have to bring up for a man versus a woman, but I try to keep it, very similar. I mean, the only difference, to go back to this, is really talking about the pelvic floor, but it's still the same muscles, and we all have the same, types of muscles down there. So it might be just saying it in a way that everybody in the class, making it as inclusive. And I say this for genders, keeping it as and ages, demographics, genders, keeping it as inclusive as possible to make sure that everybody in the class feels welcome. So using as many cues as possible.
Linda, is there any special approach that you take?
When I'm teaching with them, and because I do a lot of one-on-one, I find that men tend to be a little tighter in their hamstrings. They need to have their legs a little wider sometimes. So I'll tell them ahead of time, like, this is how we're going to do this, or we're going to do this up on a box today, in order that your posture can be stronger and you can be more efficient at the exercise, because the exercise is about your posture, not how much your pressure is going through. So nobody gets that feeling of, well, I'm cheating if I use a prop. But I'll, use sometimes, as Abby said, sometimes with the pelvic floor. And again, sometimes I feel like I've got to kind of watch, but how long I've been with a person. But, I'll say things kind of like, hey, you're walking into a cold lake and your pelvic floor lifts up.
That's great.
So,
I've used that one. I've used that one.
and I actually read another one that somebody said, because with females, we've all heard, pretend that you're trying to stop your urination. And I saw that somebody had posted somewhere that for males, they tell them to, as if they are trying to pee over a fence.
Okay.
Kind of like the cold lake.
Look at
but
you're like, it's funny.
I think it's great. When I taught a lot of pregnancy and exercise. I mean, well, I was pregnant for a decade I have 4 kids. So I was either pregnant or lactating or like every time I laughed, I would pee. So I do Kegels, and it's like first floor, second floor, third floor, and then lower it down slowly. And hopefully you stop at a certain level so you don't, totally soil your seat there. But these are really, really good cues. I am going to take the screen real quickly here just for a second. And I am going to show you guys, I've got a new, SCW has a new seat program. So for you guys on the podcast, it's seatfitness.com, one word. And it is a program for active agers and anyone needing extra supported exercise for ageless training. And the cool thing about this program is it is actually a membership, so that you get new choreography, new music for 8 different songs, making it a 45-minute workout every 12 weeks, every 90 days. So that's kind of cool. And we also have Florida Mania coming up. Very excited. We're going to be in Abby's territory very soon. And here I'll show you a little bit of Florida. So that's pretty exciting. We're very happy actually to be seeing people face to face. We just found out that we filled our hotel block and we opened up another 100 rooms. So if you guys are interested in getting out of town and joining us in Florida, we welcome you with open arms. I really want to thank you, Abby, for joining us tonight. Linda and Isabelle, you guys have been fantastic. Carter, thank you for running the webinar. We actually are at our 139th webinar. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't even believe it. And we also do this as a podcast, so if you can't make the Zoom, feel free to join the podcast. We are going to send out a recording. We'll put links for everybody in the bottom of the recording so that you guys will be able to go online and find these wonderful people on Instagram and Facebook and online. So again, thank you all for joining us. Everybody have a great night and take care.